So we're going to start today super easy on the homework. You are given a take-home test, or you're going to be given a take-home test, and it's your homework to bring it back. Yes?
I don't know why. But I don't know what I was gonna ask. Oh wait, are we doing a review game today?
We are going to do review at the end, but we have other stuff to do, including new math. So if you guys can put this please in your, I'm going to tell you some stuff about your test though. At the end, it'll help you. So put this into your secret place that you can test. I'll let you hand them out for me when it's time. This is your take-home test. Don't open it right now. Don't open it. Yeah, the test will have a discussion question. It's from the cards, so it's not something that requires.
I already told him hard time reading articles. It doesn't really matter what it's about.
Why?
Actually, I've read one article about shoes.
Why do you have a hard time reading articles? That's curious.
It's like a book with no plot. So I can't really read it.
You don't like straight information.
Yeah.
Well, then it was your assignment because it's just a skill. Partly for the information, but I told you plenty about the Coptic Church. Part of the skill I was going for was actually reading something that was a little bit harder and answering questions on it, reading comprehension. So another thing that unfortunately you're going to have to be really good at by next year. I know, there's all these things that are just terrible about growing up. I know, and I'm like, I'm being too easy on you if I make all of your classes interesting and tell you too many stories, because then you won't be ready. I know, it is interesting, I agree. Yes, Mara? No question. History is amazing. All right, so you have a take-home test. Bring it back on Thursday. Please remember, those of you who are new, that the signature goes on the envelope. The outside, back envelope. The signature on the inside is for when I give it back to you, and I want your parents to see the grade. So they don't need to sign the inside of it. I know all the teachers are different, and I know it's hard to keep it up with it, but that's a growing up skill too, keeping up with all your teachers having different rules about stuff. Sign the outside seal of the envelope. I'm going to start right here. I told you guys that about once a week in February, I want to do our opening prayer related to Black History Month, which is February. And this time, I spent a bit of time looking into some Negro spirituals. I thought that maybe some of you guys already know this. Did you know that music can move the soul? Does anybody here just love music? Like music is your language? Yeah. So I'm actually not that much of a music person, which means that I'm always very analytical about music, which is fine. I can teach about it. Maybe I have to focus to enter into it, but this is something that I think is really significant, because a lot of times we think of prayers as, closing your eyes and saying words. But prayers can also be sung, because a prayer is something that orients you toward God. And so songs can definitely be prayers. It doesn't have to be spoken word anything. It could be a song that moves you toward the Lord. And in this case, the Negro spirituals were particular songs that were used for different purposes. One of them was for prayer. This song is a great example of it. Some of them, though, just this little history side note, some of the Negro spirituals had different, more interesting purposes. Who knows what else these songs could be used for besides contemplating eternity and the freedom that one day we will have in Jesus? You guys really don't know the history of the spirituals? All right, so imagine this is during time of enslavement. A bunch of people getting together and singing about crossing the Jordan, swing low, sweet chariots. One day I'm gonna be free.
Were they like codes for like how to say that?
Sometimes they were codes. Sometimes they were like coded songs to say, if you have the courage to get away, this is how you make it to the Underground Railroad. This is how you can find your path to freedom. So not all of them were like that. Some of them were just straight up how great heaven will be, but some of them were, you know, the Canaan, the promised land, the crossing Jordan was actually talking about going north and going to freedom. So the spirituals are super interesting, but since we're using this for our prayer, I chose one that is definitely a prayer. This is Ethel Waters, and she sang at a Billy Graham concert, which in itself is historically fascinating because for a black woman back in the 50s, I think, when she sang, to get this sort of prominent place for singing at a Christian event was a really big deal. And you can see in her face and hear in her voice that she really believes what she's singing about. So take this as your prayer for today, and then we will say amen to this and move on. And you might actually listen to the words because they're really good for just us normal people too.
So why should I feel discouraged? Or why should the shadows come? Why should my heart be lonely? Away from heaven and home, when Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is He. For His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. So I sing because I'm happy. Oh yes, I sing His eye is on all sparrows and children. I know, and how I know that He watches me. And I know that He watches me.
go back. I got my slides out of order. All right, so we're going to start with a new map. And Amen, you said you'd hand out one. Who else would like to hand out one of them? Okay, Naomi. The two maps are right up here. If you guys do, just hand them out. So everybody gets one. What you have at this map is a big version. It says of Asia, but we're working on the Middle East and Central Asia, so we're just going to be on the edge of it. And then Naomi's handing you the names of the countries that you're going to learn, and also a zoomed in map of the area where Israel and Jordan are. Blank versions of this are already on Google Classroom, and they're also on Facts. There is also on Google Classroom a game if you would like to go ahead, if you like playing those games to help learn the countries. So I am going to write on the board here where they are. We're going to fill these in. Now, Jacob, since I'm recording this for you, this is going to take a while for us to do this in class. If you prefer, you can just fast forward this whole part and go and find yourself a map and ask your mom to help you figure out where all of these are. You don't have to listen to me talk about them. All right, so let's start with number 1 on this list, which is Afghanistan. So all the stands, there's a bunch of countries that end with stan. Is stan a prefix or a suffix? Suffix, because it's at the end of the word. So the suffix stan means the land of. So when you have like Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, Pakistan, it's the land of the Afghans, the land of the Paks, the land of the Turks. You know, that's what it means. So that's why there's a bunch in a row that have stan at the end of it. So we're going to start with Afghanistan. And you're only going to be able to find it on the big map because Afghanistan, if you find India, it's 2 up from there. Afghanistan is right here. Here, I'll point with the pointer if you need to see it. That's number 1, Afghanistan. It does not exist on the zoomed in map. It's only over here. All right, it's going to get a little easier. At the start, it's harder to orient yourself. Number 2 is Bahrain. Now, Bahrain is an island in the Persian Gulf. Do you have any idea what that means? Okay, so the Persian Gulf on this map is darkened. Over here, it's a little harder to see the darkening, so I'm going to put the water sign so you know that this is all. So the Persian Gulf, inside of it is an island. It is accessible only by a bridge or something like this. This is number 2, Bahrain. So you're going to easier find it on your zoomed in map. It is just north of that peninsula. There's a larger white peninsula that's attached. It is not the peninsula. The peninsula is something else. It's just north of there, and it's a little dot that's an island. It is. And actually on the bigger map you have to put a little dot. But let's do it. So on the bigger map, you would put a little dot right here and mark that as number 2.
Which map are you going to use for the map?
I don't know, because I want to use one map that has all of it in it. So I'll probably use something that looks more like the big map, but we don't really need to have all of that Russia and China part in it. So I need to find something that's more focused than that. Just because it's so hard to write numbers or letters on this map because it's so teeny tiny. That's why we have this.
Is that country important? It's so small.
Good question. All right, so these countries, and actually not just Bahrain, which is a very wealthy country and super significant politically, but these countries that are in the Persian Gulf region right here along the water are very important because of one of their natural resources. Anybody know? Oil. It's because of oil. This is oil country. And some of these countries are so rich that people who live in the country don't even work. Like the whole country doesn't work. They maybe have servants from other countries that come in and do their work for them. I mean, this is countries that have historically just been rolling in money. But in large part also because they exclusively own the oil market, which they less own now that we have some of our own natural resources, like in Alaska, and places where we can do it. And so whenever you hear the debate over, like Trump was having had the Dominion pipeline, and then Biden's stopping the pipeline. I don't want to get into that, but this is what they're talking about, is releasing or not releasing oil that's produced in our own country. Yeah.
Synthetic oil something that we can read in that hand?
Well, I think natural gas is probably, less bad for the environment, but it's also a natural resource. I don't know about synthetic oil. I think people tend to try to figure out how to produce things with electricity, wind, solar. Yeah, I don't know what synthetics would be because they still have to come from something. You don't create out of nothing. So then if you have a synthetic, then there's a byproduct. Is the byproduct going to be bad for the environment? So it might not end up. So if all you're thinking is like how to get not dependent on the Middle East, then yes, synthetics might be the answer. But I think most people who are working on this are also working on trying to improve our carbon footprint in general. So that's why they do these things that are not necessarily the most efficient, but they're hoping that with increased number of electric cars, they'll get better and they'll get more efficient. So it's a technology. All right, so yes, that was a great question about is Bahrain important, and I want you to think about that when we do some other things in that region. But we're going to jump over to the Mediterranean Sea for number 3. Cyprus is also an island. Do you see it?
Yes.
Look at your zoomed in map. You see it on the Mediterranean Sea? It's pretty big on the zoomed in one. Now can you find it on your other map? It's smaller on the other map, but it's there. Can you find it? It's right here. So on the bigger map, it's there. So I would mark them on both maps. I think it's good for you to see them in both places. So that's Cyprus. Number 4 is Iran. Iran is a large country. I'm going to mark it first on the big map. And I want you to notice that I'm just marking it right across this red line because the red line is not a country border. The red line, I'm just showing you what part is enlarged. So this whole thing is Iran. Over on this map, Iran runs off the map, so it's only halfway on the zoomed in map. But you can see how they both are there. Give yourself a nice big 4 to help with that. And then, Iraq is right next to Iran. So, number 5, Iraq, I'll do it on this map first, is right next to Iran, and over here then, it's right next to Iran also. So mark Iraq on both of them. Were any of you guys in my class when we did this map? Was it 2 years ago? I've changed the countries up a little bit, not terribly, but you'll find some stuff familiar and some stuff will be new-ish. Number 6, Israel. Do you already know how to find Israel? On the zoomed-in map. Can you find it? Now look on the zoomed-in map. It's touching the Mediterranean Sea, and it has a really weird border, a deep V that goes down to the Red Sea. Can you see it? Yeah? So this is number 6, and I'll show you that it goes down like this and touches the Red Sea right there. Yes, yeah, go ahead and put it on the big map too. It's just going to be little. Okay, everybody caught up? Everybody with me? Number 7, Jordan is a next door neighbor to Israel. It has a really wacko border that looks like a lightning bolt or something. So this right here is Jordan. You see how it has this Percy Jackson border right here? Was that Percy Jackson? No, that was Harry Potter. Percy Jackson, did they both have lightning bolts?
Yeah.
Did Percy Jackson have a lightning thing? I thought he had some lightning thing. Is that only Harry Potter?
No, it was.
I know he had the head thing. All right, so that right there is Jordan. Yes, you can find Jordan over here, right next to 6 to 7. Number 8 is a stan, Kazakhstan. So it's actually the largest of the stands. So go over here and give yourself a nice big 8. It only goes onto that map. You can't mark the stands on our zoomed in map. So it's over there, number 8. Number 9 is Kuwait. Now we're back to the same intrigue that Lydia brought up last time. Kuwait, over which we had, we sent soldiers in the 90s to fight over Kuwait because of what? Oil, because of oil, is right here. So you'll notice with Kuwait, this is on the zoomed in map.
What's the reason for there being so much oil in the Middle East?
Well, it's desert. It's a desert region. All of this map is desert, and I mean, I guess oil must collect in places like under certain circumstances, compression, whatever. Because if it's in Alaska too, Alaska is a tundra, so it's a cold desert. So there must be something about those kind of regions that causes it to be developed. It's a very good question. Yeah, there's not oil in Virginia, but there is in Texas. So there's something about Texas that also lends itself toward oil. And then there's oil in other places. There's probably a lot more oil in the world if you were able to dig it out of the oceans, which is called, anybody know the term for this? Offshore drilling. So offshore drilling is people who basically go and build platforms in the middle of the ocean and go down and are basically trying to pump oil. Yeah. Well, you know, the scary thing about this is when they have the disasters, and the disasters are like the boat crashes and the oil gets out, and that's really, really, really bad because of what? You might know. It would be bad for a fire, but you're in the middle of the ocean. So why is it bad if there's a lot of oil spilled? Right. So you know, oil and water don't mix, so it's not going to go back into the water. It sits on top. So all the ducks, all the birds, all the sea life, everybody gets the oil, and then they can't fly, they can't move. So it just becomes this environmental disaster. And the oil floats around. Like, it floats around, and it will never go away unless we go and basically put chemicals and stuff all over it to try to like dissipate it and then do all this cleanup. It's a huge ordeal. And this has happened multiple times, either by the offshore wells having a problem, or the Exxon Valdez was the famous one that this is probably the first time there was a oil problem like that. But those were our problems. That's not what happened here. All right, did we just get through 8? No, we did 9, Kuwait. Oh, I wanted to show you Kuwait, what a lovely spot it has on the Persian Gulf. Who is it blocking from the water? Yeah, Iraq doesn't have any access to the water. So they have to stay on really good terms with Kuwait, don't they? Because the ships are the best way to transport it. Did we already talk about this? Sometimes I get my classes mixed up. You really don't want to put oil in an airplane, do you? No. No. It'd be very heavy, which takes a lot of fuel to fly it. It would also be very explosive, like a bomb. So you don't want to put it on there. They do put oil on trucks, but it's really pricey because it takes a ton of gas. Oil turns into gas, you know, among other things. It takes a ton of gas to move heavy oil. So it's like, it's useful, but you don't want to do it across the world. You don't want to, trains are actually really good for moving heavy stuff. You get a train going, it just keeps going. That's why trains haven't disappeared, because there's a lot that can still be transported on them. But ships are the way to move things from the Middle East to our country, heavy things. So, all right, that was Kuwait. Lebanon, number 10, is right next to Israel. So look at Israel and go just north of Israel on the Mediterranean Sea. Can you find it just from those words? just north of Israel on the Mediterranean Sea. It's number 10, Lebanon. Did you write it? You can do it on your little map now too. Now that you know where it is, you can write it in teeny tiny writing on the little map. That's number 10. All right, number 11, Oman.
Did you ever put on number 9?
It's right here. Did I put it over here? I did not put it right here. There we go. You can put number 9 on your zoomed in map. It works. All right, number 10, Oman. There are two that are at the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula, Yemen and Oman. Oman's the one that's on the right-hand side, or the one that's in the east. So I'm going to put it over here first. This is easier to see it. This one is Oman. I'm going to put it now on this, but you literally are just writing off of your page on this one because the page isn't far enough. So start on your big map and mark Oman right here. I'm going to use this right here is Oman. Number 11. It's at the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula. At the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula, where it looks like that. If you did it on the zoomed in map, you're going to be going off the page a little bit. All right, that was number 11, Oman. Pakistan, back to the stands. Pakistan is right next to India. Is this 11 or 12? 12. Pakistan, right next to India. It's the southernmost stand.
This is related more to India, but why did the British Raj turn into India?
Why did they turn into it?
Because that was British Raj territory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why was that a transfer?
Oh, well, I mean, the Brits were there who colonized India. So what part are you asking?
It was just like the British Raj before it was like India. So why did it turn into?
Right. I thought Raj meant ruler. Does it?
I don't know much about it. I just know.
Yeah, I think Raj is a type of ruler. So the British were the Raj, were the ruler, but I could be wrong about that. No, it was. I mean, India was the existing sort of thing, but like everything else, the British colonized something that was made up of a lot of different people groups. That's actually, Pakistan has a very storied history because of the British chopping it up in order to solve one problem and then creating another problem. And they were trying to solve a religious problem because I don't know if you remember that India has Hindus and Buddhists and like these different religions, and so they were trying to solve it, and then they just ended up splitting right through the middle just because they didn't have the sensitivity to where the natural lines would have fallen. So it's a pretty interesting story. Yes?
Why does it say that there's an indefinite border between India and China?
Oh, that's a good question. Wait.
The dotted line is indefinite.
Nepal? Is that under debate right now? Or what's the date on this map? Do you see a date? Really, if you want the most current, you just zoom in on your mom's phone when she's got her navigation up and see what Google Maps is saying right now. But even then, you just get their political bent. Because Russia took over Crimea, and you have to look at it to be like, what does Google Maps say? What country is it now? And sometimes they won't take any position. So I don't know. This may not be current. There's another place that's dotted right here.
Yeah, I was wondering what that one was.
That one we're about to get to. All right, was that Pakistan we just did? Number 13, Qatar. All right, so Qatar is the peninsula that's right next to Bahrain. So 13 is this white thing that's attached to the Arabian Peninsula that pokes out into the Persian Gulf. Super wealthy. Super wealthy.
Tiny as that is. As tiny as that is.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you say big, like not even on the big map. It's like
All right, so Qatar is just rolling in money and stuff like that, and it's just, unfortunately, these are not generally great places to visit. However, if you're interested, you could become a missionary. But if you want to be a missionary over to this part of the world, then you need to learn an actual business. You need to either be in healthcare, you need to be a business person, you need to be a teacher. You've got to do something that, because they don't take kindly to people coming over to be missionaries in their country. But yeah, it's a pretty significant place that needs to be reached with the gospel. All right, that was Qatar. Next one is Saudi Arabia, largest country in the Arabian Peninsula. Can you find it before I show you where it is? Look at the big one in the Arabian Peninsula. It's number 14, Saudi Arabia. Did you find it? Okay. All right, number 14, the big one in the Arabian Peninsula. Yes. All right, that is Saudi Arabia. Number 15, Syria. Now we're back up into the Israeli politics side of things. Syria is right next to Lebanon and Jordan. This is 15. So Syria is right here. It's all part of all this conflict in Middle East things. You can also put it over here in this section, because now you know how to orient yourself on both maps. 15 is Syria. 16 is Turkey. Turkey is the country of these that gets closest to Europe. And Turkey, if you remember, you can't go back to Constantinople. Constantinople was on the very border of it. So this right here is Turkey. And it was 16, right? Yeah. And it goes all the way over here to where you have this, this has been started. It's really an interesting country because it is Muslim country in terms of Muslim government. But they kind of go back and forth because they, of course, want European visitors. They have a lot of reason to draw them. And yet they keep sort of electing, people into government who want to then close the country down. So that's the thing, it seems like a democratically elected government would be the best thing, except when you start democratically electing people who take away women's rights and won't let, there be any interaction with the West. So it's not necessarily democracy that provides freedom if you elect people who are going to take away your freedom. That's the Middle East issue. That was Turkey. We're almost there. Number 17, Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan is over here with the stands. This is 17. You have stand, Turkmenistan. 17, Turkmenistan. There's only one more stand. Here, I'll point to it. 17, Turkmenistan. So you had Pakistan, you had Afghanistan, and then you have Turkmenistan. You're going to have to figure out some way to learn it that probably involves grouping the stands together. And then I usually group you can see I never get calls because they're so jolting when they happen. And it's not even a call because my college students will only FaceTime. They won't even call. And it's probably not even me. She's probably FaceTiming somebody else on our Apple ID. All right, so that was Turkmenistan. Let's see. United Arab Emirates. This is the one you were talking about. Number 18, the UAE. I'm going to do it on this map over here because the UAE has apparently at different times it had disputed borders. So it's got the dotted line. It also has really awesome waterfront property, doesn't it?
On the other map, it looks like it's not.
It's not. That's what I'm saying. It depends on the date of the map, and I don't know what it is. So you can also put the UAE right here, but it goes off the map. So the United Arab Emirates, imagine back in the day when somebody would sit out on the peak of that tip and then ask for tolls for people who are coming through. The UAE is in a good place. All right, one more stand, Uzbekistan, right up there next to Turkmenistan. Are you guys already ahead of me? Have you already marked your maps? Number 19. You see where number 19 is? And then we have only one left, and I already did tell you that Yemen is next to Oman. So number 20, Yemen, I'm going to mark it on this one first. right here, 20, Yemen. You can also mark it here, but it's a little off the map. All right. Super interesting, isn't it? Okay, I would like for you, go ahead and put those away. Did I three-hole punch them for you?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I remember. Get out a piece of paper, and I'm going to erase all these numbers. Get out a piece of paper. We're doing this for just a participation grade. This is not a serious grade. However, the idea is very serious. So I want you to listen carefully. You need a piece of paper, and I want you to listen carefully. Some of you are 8th graders, some of you are 7th graders. Some of you are talking to each other while I'm telling you this. Very important conversation, which is when you get to 9th grade, you are going to be expected to read things and to take quizzes on them before you even get taught the material. Those are called reading quizzes. It's quiz just to see if you can read and learn things, and they're kind of hard. Now, I'm going to give you a not hard reading quiz, like easy breezy. We'll call it a high level reading quiz. No complete sentences. This is just very fly over the border. You're going to answer 5 questions. So you're going to be writing 5 or 6 words down. You write your name on the piece of paper. Do you have paper? Yeah, right now. Get a piece of paper out. Right now, piece of paper, and write your
They say quiz, but it's our
participation. Yes, it's a participation quiz.
So if you get like a number wrong, you still in there.
Some of you bring back your test not signed until the second day, and you get a 50 for doing that. Doesn't really wreck your grade, does it? It doesn't wreck your grade unless you get in the habit of getting 0s and 50s on things, and then your grade will suffer.
Wait, so this is.
The point is not the grade. The point is about the reading quiz. All right. So number 1, I would like for you to write down one word as an answer to this question. What country was the lesson about? Don't say anything out loud. I'm talking about the lesson. You know, you did the note cards, you copy the front and back, I put them on Google Classroom. What country was this about? Is your question going to give away the answer?
No.
Okay.
How many questions?
5. Yes. Number 1, what country? That is true. I have the, yes.
So it is like what we read in the middle.
What is the what?
Is this like what we did on Google Classroom or the?
No, not the Coptic one that you were finishing. It was the next, like, what we're going to talk about today. And you just had to, and all I said was read it and then copy those 4 note cards where I gave you the answers already.
Wait, was that on Google Classroom? Yeah.
The note cards were, did you get the note cards?
I printed
Okay.
note cards.
Yeah, they were on the note cards.
I didn't get to read the chapter.
Write down your thing. All right, number 1, what country was it about? Number 2, who was the general who killed the king in order to make himself king? Basically, who was the main guy in this whole chapter? What was his name? That, of course, if you finish reading a chapter and you don't know who it was about, you've missed the point for sure. So, I want you to know what country it was about, who was the person that was the star of the chapter, and there's no trick in that. Just the straightforward guy who was the general who killed the king. Number 3, what time frame did this happen in? You can either say a word or you can say a number. What time frame? How would you describe the era of history? Or can you give me a number? It does not have to be exact. It can be close. Okay, number 4. Did you write the front and back of all 4 cards that were due today? Yes or no? Did you just copy the cards, front and back, like you were supposed to? And number 5, did you read the entire chapter? Did you read the lesson? That question's on there because I feel like some of you are getting in the habit of looking for note cards but not doing the reading. And that is not going to fly when you're a high schooler. You have to discipline yourself to do the readings. Even if you think you might be able to get away without having done it, you still need to do it. In this case, I'm also trying to reinforce the point that you are going to have to take increasingly harder reading quizzes. So we'll work our way toward that. But I just wanted to surprise you with an easier one. Now let's go over the answers. Switch your pen or something. Don't switch papers. Grade your own thing. I want you to only put a check or an X or a question mark if you have a question mark. And here we go. What country was this lesson about? Say it out, everybody. Scotland. Check it or X it. Number 2, who was the general who killed the king? Macbeth. Yep. Check or X. Number 3, what was the time frame? Don't yell it out. Middle Ages is good. Wait, what's 1,000 for? Oh, 800 to 1,000. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Medieval, good. Medieval Scotland, excellent, excellent. I love that. The actual time frame, if you put a number, would be around 1,000. The exact one, 1040, 1040. But I want to make sure you understand that we're hitting, in all of the stuff you're talking about, all these different countries are hitting right about 1,000. Some of them, of the dates are like 975, but it's really close to 1,000. That's where we've gotten in history. And then the answers ought to be yes to the next ones. If you put no, which is good that you're being honest, give yourself an X if you put a no. But give yourself a check if you put a yes, and make sure you told the truth no matter what. All right, I'm going to come around and get that from you. And let's talk here about Macbeth, the general who killed Duncan with his own hands, even though it actually was like a head-to-head in combat. In these times in medieval Scotland, did you read your homework on fast? Exactly. I hope you put no on that. Did you put no? If you didn't do this, you should have put no in your card. I'm so impressed. Yeah. No, the kings didn't always, in Scotland, they didn't pass down stuff from father to son. They didn't pass stuff down from father to son. It usually went from like one to a completely different family and then back to that family. So it was not the sort of thing where they necessarily would have passed down. Macbeth was not out of range of the person. Here's the real Macbeth story. Here's Macbeth historically. He was a king of the Scots. His rule was marked by efficient government and the promotion of Christianity. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah. He was best known as a murderer and a usurper in Shakespeare's play. Shakespeare just has his own issues. Macbeth bears little resemblance to the real 11th century Scottish king. 11th century, do not graduate from middle school without knowing that the 11th century is what years? Yeah, it's going to be something that starts with a 10. The 19th century is what years? 1800s. The 17th century is 1600s. It's always the 100 years that go before that number. That's very just orienting, important to know. In August 1040, he killed the ruling King Duncan in battle. Macbeth became king. And his marriage to Kenneth's granddaughter strengthened his claim to the throne. For 14 years, he was a pretty good ruler. He imposed law and order, encouraged Christianity. He even traveled to Rome for a papal jubilee and was a brave leader. He made successful forays over the border to Northumbria, England. He was, however, killed the same way that he became king by Duncan's son, who killed him head-to-head in a battle, but in like hand-to-hand combat. Okay, we know that in medieval Scotland, being a king was violent and dangerous because there were 12 assassinations during this time. That's a lot of people getting assassinated in a not long enough period of time. And we also know that Shakespeare's play Macbeth was not historically accurate. This one should say, however, because this is the backside. This is a however. The play does depict how the ambitious desire to rule can cause tragedy. So I'm gonna emphasize that by reading to you one of Shakespeare's monologues. In the play, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth get these three kind of weirdo witches who give a series of prophecies. One of them says, it says some things that come true, and then one of them says Macbeth is going to be king. Never crossed his mind to try to be king in the play. He gets a prophecy, and he and his wife start becoming obsessed with the fact that the witch said he's going to become king, and then Lady Macbeth gets particularly antagonistic about it and starts saying, we've got to make this happen. So she basically encourages Macbeth to murder Duncan while he is sleeping at their castle, under their roof. It really breaks the hospitality rules. And when this happens, she's all about let's be courageous, be a man, just go and kill him. But after the murder happens, both of them start having these really obsessive thoughts that are really different from each other. So Lady Macbeth starts having nightmares, wandering around, seeing bloody daggers all over the place. She's just having really a hard time, really sort of losing her mind. Macbeth goes the other direction. He becomes hardened, cold, callous, uncaring. He sort of loses his humanity. So the play of Macbeth is much less about history and much more about a psychological study about what happens when somebody has this existential crisis. They sin, and then they are hopeless because there's no way, they don't have any sort of way to connect back with the person they were before. So this is the without Christ, and you do something really, really bad, how do you feel about life? This is that view of the world. And let me read to you what Shakespeare puts into Macbeth's mouth. Macbeth hears a scream in the night, and this is what he says. I've almost forgot the taste of fears. That's an interesting scream. I almost forgot the taste of fears. Time has been, once upon a time, my senses would have cooled to hear a night shriek. I would have felt frozen by that. And my fell of hair would at a dismal treatise rouse and stir as life were in it. My hair would have stood on end. My hair would have stood as if life were in it. But now I have supped full with horrors, direness, familiar to my slaughterous thoughts, cannot once start me. I'm a murderer, nothing moves me. And then this guy comes in, and he says to him, wherefore was that cry? The guy says, the queen, my lord, is dead. She killed herself. She couldn't take her thoughts anymore. Macbeth's response to his wife that he was so close to dying, she should have died hereafter. Just another way of saying she would have died eventually. There would have been a time for such a word, and here's his commentary on life. Being short, but just going on and having no purpose and no meaning for him. tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. That's life, a brief candle. Life is but a walking shadow. Life is a poor player or actor that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. Life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Pretty unhappy when he said this. But aren't those interesting and powerful words? I memorized them when I was in high school, and they often come back to mind because they are the words of someone having an existential crisis, wondering what the meaning and purpose of life is. Shakespeare puts them perfectly into Macbeth's mouth. So that's what Macbeth is like. If you want to read a tragedy, it's a tragedy of kind of the human psyche, the human soul. All right, last word. You're going to have some fill in the blank without a word bank. Lest you feel crisis by it all, I'm providing you an opportunity for 5 bonus points on your test. Up to 5, I should say, because it depends on how well you do on this. If you can, on a map of the world, put the countries that we have studied. You look in this, Addie? Iceland, Greenland, Canada, Scotland, Russia, China, Egypt, New Zealand, Sudan, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe. If you can place them on a map, you're going to get some extra credit for that. That'll help you with your test.
You have to get all of them together?
No, I said up to 5. No, like it's a map of the world.
So you just go to the general area of like Zimbabwe?
Yeah, but I'm gonna know if you like get it close at all. Like, yeah, you can't get it completely wrong. Yes.
So if you get them all wrong, will that take away from your test grade?
No.
Or will you just not get any?
All bonus. Just bonus.